Okay, we're gonna start now, actually. Hi.
Yes.
So my name is Casey. I am one of the 5 co-hosts of this chapter. The other hosts are Barry, Max, Francesco, who's sitting at the door now, and David, who's speaking tonight. Before I introduce him, I just want to sort of get a feel for the room. How many folks are have attended our events before? So Service Design New York. Okay. So all the people who didn't raise their hands, please make sure you welcome them, okay? To show them what kind of community we are, which we try to be a welcoming community. If you're new here, this is a brief orientation. So usually we begin by mingling over food, which you are welcome to have more of, food, drinks throughout the event. And then one of the hosts gives an introduction, which is what's happening now. And then we usually have a main event, which is by a speaker or a facilitator, and then followed by some Q&A if we have time for that. And then finally, we end with more networking and food. If you haven't already used the bathroom is down the hallway that way. There's a toilet sign. I think you should be able to use that one. And yeah, so that's the end of my orientation. A couple of housekeeping items. Thank you to our sponsor, Intuit, for not only the location, but also the food. And then number 2, who are we? So the Service Design Network, New York chapter. We are a local volunteer-run chapter of the Global Service Design Network. And our aim in the New York chapter is to make service design more accessible as a discipline and as a methodology. I'm starting to speak slower because I am aware of the speed of my voice. Number 3, volunteer with us. So if you like what you heard tonight or anything that you've heard in any of our events, we're always looking for people to recap these events on Medium. And the idea is that you could get a chance to grow your online voice and that you can also offer other people to learn more about service design. So come see me after the event if you are interested. Additionally, if you are familiar with service design and you or you know someone who you think could be a great speaker for us, we're always looking for people to give presentations, workshops, or service safaris, or any alternative formats. And we have spots open for early 2025. So again, come see me if you know someone or if you yourself want to give that talk. You know, we have had community members, Tracy, give us very great talks and events. And then finally, if you are trying to keep track of us, there are 2 main ways. One is on LinkedIn. We're starting to post all our events on LinkedIn. So if you are frequent on the platform, feel free to give us a follow there. You'll be able to hear about events. And then Meetup, which I think is how all of you signed up for this event today. And I know that, sometimes Meetup will send you like, did you attend this event? Can you rate us? We really ask that you do rate us. It helps us to get feedback for the event, anything that we can do better, anything that we can continue to focus on. So please don't ignore that email from Meetup and try to respond if you see it. Okay, that is housekeeping. Now I am ready to introduce our speaker for tonight, David Russo, whom I have the privilege of co-hosting this chapter with. He currently works as a service design at Intuit Mailchimp. And other than our local chapter, is also part of the organizing committee for the Service Design Global Conferences in 2023, last year and this year. His background, as we'll learn more about tonight, is in sales and hospitality. And specifically, he has had positions as a chef-educator, and a sales manager for a specialty food importer. When he's not doing these service designy things, he lives and breathes all things ice hockey. So you can definitely ask him about that. And he is, it says you're looking forward to his new achievement of empty nester, but I believe that achievement has been unlocked.
That has been unlocked.
Yeah, so please give your warmest welcome to David.
Thank you. How's everybody doing? Good. Thank you so much for coming and for extending me the honor of sharing my story with you and talking just a little bit about, it'll be a little bit of my journey about how I sort of ended up in service design, but it'll be a lot about things I learned in the kitchen and in the restaurant industry, seen through a couple of different lenses, and how that informs what I do and how I think it can hopefully inform what you do. This is, full disclosure, This is literally the first time I have ever spoken this presentation out loud. This is like draft 4 of version 1. So hopefully, I think it'll go well. But I appreciate, if that being said, if you have any feedback about the presentation, by all means, I would love to have it, because I want to make it better, as good as I can. This is a presentation that I have been thinking about giving for many years. It's been kicking around my head, and it was Casey who said, if you build it, they will come. And so here I am.
Here, validated.
So everything I know about service design, I learned in the kitchen. Why the title? As Casey alluded to, I spent 25 years in the food service and hospitality industry. 10 of those years were as a chef educator. I was a baker for a little while. You know, those were directly in operations. I ran a catering business. I did front of the house, back of the house, the whole realm of it. Then the 15 years, the last 15 years of it, I was a sales rep and sales manager for a specialty foods importer. And what was particular about that experience and how it relates to my thoughts on service and service design is that I got the opportunity to go into kitchens every day, different kitchens across the city, run by all different levels of chefs and all different types of operations, and see how they execute services every day for 15 years. So it was a great education to kind of see in service delivery what works, what doesn't. Now, my thoughts about hospitality and service have been greatly influenced by Danny Meyer. He, if any of you know who he is the founder and CEO. I don't know if he's officially the CEO anymore, but he's the head guru behind Union Square Hospitality Group. Gramercy Tavern, one of my favorite restaurants, has been around since, I think it started in 1994, so 30 years now. And as an unpaid endorsement, if you ever have the opportunity to see the highest, to go to one of these restaurants, you can see sort of the highest level of service in the flesh, right? They execute service and what it means to be to deliver services and to be hospitable at the highest level. Okay, so we all know, or many of you know, perhaps, the restaurant metaphor for describing service design. It is how I often describe service design to people who have no idea what I do. My wife, my family. You know, so basically, right, you go to some third-party app, you make a reservation, maybe you've gone to the website, you have looked at the menu, you've looked at the hours, you found the location, so you've gone to a different app, you've made a reservation, then you get some kind of reminder, whether it's by text, sometimes you get a phone call if you're really special. Then you arrive at the restaurant, you're greeted by somebody, they take you in, they sit you at the table, they give you a piece of paper with a bunch of information on it. You have a conversation with somebody. They take the piece of paper, they replace it with some food. They do that a few times. Then you have another conversation, they give you a different piece of paper with some numbers on it. Hopefully not too big. There's a transaction that happens, and then you leave. So there are all these touch points that happen throughout that service, but at the same time, that is only what you see as the customer, right? There's this whole backstage set of actions that happen that support that experience that they want you to have, right? So there's food that needs to be ordered, there's staff that needs to be trained, there needs to be integrations between the reservation platform and the restaurant and their table chart. And there needs to be menus printed, and there needs to be scripts written for how the servers talk about the food, right? And so going through that experience as a restaurateur is what enabled me to come to service design and have a fundamental understanding of what was going on in service design without even really being able to put it into words, right? And knowing that front stage, backstage dynamic, and knowing about all those touch points that have to happen. So for the purposes of this discussion, I am going to refer us to, this is service design thinking, right? A pretty baseline text for service design, and talking about the 5 principles of service design as they see them, right? It's user-centered, it's co-creative, it has sequencing, it has evidencing, and it is holistic, right? So if we're gonna just establish that as the baseline for what we're talking about, I'm gonna go through each of these and just talk about how they manifest themselves in a restaurant, kind of what I learned from them, and how that applies to service design. All right, so services are user-centered, placing a human at the heart of the design process. Now, Danny Meyer, he's got a couple of quotes that I like. Service is the technical delivery of a product. Hospitality is how the delivery of that product makes the recipient feel. He also says, hospitality exists when you believe that the other person is on your side. It is present when something happens for you, not to you. Now, both of those aspects are important, right? It is important to get strict technical delivery of the service right, because without that, the whole thing fails. It is also important to understand, I think, that hospitality has to be a part of what we do. And it is my belief that we as service designers have to do more than design service. We have to design hospitality, because we are trying to, regardless of what industry we're in, we are trying to make our customers, our users feel enveloped, lifted up, made warm, given all the warm fuzzies by the delivery of the service. Okay, so what does it mean to be user-centered, right? Understanding users and their context, identifying user pain points, designing solutions that address those needs, evaluating solutions to ensure that they meet users' requirements, all the things we know. How did this start to show up, and how did I start to see this in restaurants? What do you hear every time you sit down when you're about to place an order, when you're talking to your server? What's the question nowadays that they always ask you?
Are you ready?
No, almost.
Do you take credit cards?
Are there any food allergies the chef should be aware of, right? So immediately putting the customer at the center of indicating we care about you, we need your input, and this experience is going to be focused around what you might need. And so if there are allergies, for example, right, we're going to use that information and develop our service around it, right? And if you go on to, I just made a reservation the other day on Resy. And as soon as you make the reservation, they ask you, what's the occasion, right? Is there any special requests, right? So they are immediately centering you as the customer into what the experience is going to be. Now, Danny Meyer has another quote that I love. He says, one size fits one, right? Any service that you deliver has to be personalized to the person receiving it. Otherwise, it becomes that much less effective, right? It becomes that much less impactful. Right? You want the person that you're delivering this service to, that you're creating this hospitable moment for, to feel valued, to feel seen, to feel heard. And the personalization that you put into your service is going to help build that. Any questions so far? I'll pause. Anybody have any questions, anything they want to say?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you started to describe the service, you went immediately to the resi and the reservation thing,
Mhm.
as opposed to keeping it in the restaurant.
So going back to sort of what I said at the beginning, right? The experience starts at that moment of making the reservation, or can. That's one
Or
entry
can,
point,
yeah.
right? That's an entry point. And look, I'll be honest, right? Everything I know I learned in the kitchen. That's a snappy title, right? I've learned it from my experience in the entire hospitality and restaurant industry. So, right, I'm looking at, was just using resi as sort of an example of an entry point that immediately centers the customer on, right, how do you need to experience this service? So, is that?
Yeah,
that
no, I
answer
just
your
thought it was interesting
Okay.
that it started even before.
Yeah. So now we get to co-creative. Fostering a collaboration throughout the entire design process. Service is a monologue. Hospitality is a dialogue. Right? There's this constant back and forth about how the service should be delivered. Okay? And the restaurant industry, like no other, right, there is this immediate constant back and forth for what needs to happen. Oop, I've gotten a slide ahead. Oop, going the wrong way. Come back. Okay, now we need to. Sorry, it's got to run through all this. Okay, we'll come back to this. Pretend you didn't see it. Okay.
What a great reveal.
Okay. So, right, in a restaurant, there is things, particularly as what I learned as a server in a restaurant, right? Immediately, you're walking up to a table and you have to read the table, right? You've got to understand what's going on at the table at that moment, who is sitting there. And that's what this has to do with, right? So if you take a look at these three scenarios, okay, you immediately start to get an idea without knowing anything else, but just by looking, imagine you're in the shoes of a server, you're walking up to the table. You sort of have an idea of what is happening at that table without even having interacted, right? So what's happening here?
Romantic.
It's some kind of romantic situation. Do you want to go up with, hey, how's it going? What's happening tonight? Right? Is that the energy you want to bring to that table at that moment, to that interaction? Probably not. You probably would bring it here, right? This is what's going on here. Some kind of celebration, some kind of, right? It's lively. It is, right? People are laughing. You can kind of match that energy as you come up to the table to deliver whatever service you're going to do. Up there in the upper right, feels a little tense, right? There's some kind of serious discussion going on. Again, that's going to influence, you're going to read that situation, and that's going to influence how you engage in delivery of that service, right? And so what I would challenge you all to do is, right, find ways that you can bring that into the services you're delivering, right? It's going to be tricky, sure, because they're often digital. You don't have the sort of obvious signs that you've got here, but there are ways that you can figure that out. And of course, in the restaurant industry, we get instant feedback as to how the service is going, right? Customers do not hesitate to tell us when something is going wrong. So again, find ways in services that you create to get that instant feedback, right? Whether it is surveys, VOC data, you know, a lot of times if it's interacting with a human, right, you can get that feedback. But figure out ways that you can receive that and immediately turn things around or react to that feedback. Okay, so sequencing. If we go back to the original discussion of what the journey is, so now we get to run through this, right? We can make a reservation, confirm it, arrive at the restaurant, you get seated, you look at the menu, you order, you do a bunch of eating, you get the bill, you pay, and then you leave. That has to happen in a very particular order, right? And as a guest, certainly as a employee of the restaurant, if something goes wrong in that sequence, it throws off the entire delivery of the service, right? And this is, my wife will tell you, this is one of my big pet peeves, right? If I'm still eating my first course and I get delivered my second course, not only does it piss me off as the customer, it throws the kitchen off, it throws the servers off, like it just throws a wrench into the whole sequence of the evening. And you're never gonna pay the bill if you're physically in the restaurant. You're never gonna pay the bill before you get your food. Now, obviously, like takeout and stuff, different story. But you're never gonna pay your bill before you get your food. You're never going to leave the restaurant before you get seated, presuming you want to eat there. You know, so again, the service has to be delivered in a very specific order to make sense, to help give the customer who is receiving the service right, you're building on established norms of what the service should be. So customers come into your service having experienced something like it at some point before. They have a mental model of how it should go. If you disrupt that, you better have a damn good reason, right? And it better be additive to the service. And of course, if something goes wrong, kind of like the picture we saw before, right, where they have given you some negative feedback, right? Find ways for service recovery. If something goes wrong, what are you going to do to fix it? Now, again, a lot of times that needs to involve a human, but figure out ways that maybe you can make that happen digitally. Yes, Francesca.
I was just looking at this, and I think this is a great example of how a service can be linear, but also non-linear at the same time. Because if you look at this, like there's a pretty linear path to getting into the core of your service experience, which is eating and, you know, receiving first and second course. But then when you're in that experience, there's almost like a circularity of it. Like it's a cycle that repeats, right? So you're in there, you're getting your first course, you're consuming it, then you're getting the second course, you're consuming it, and then when all that experience is done, then you kind of, you know, get out of your journey.
Right. You may be getting 7 courses if you're at a particular restaurant. And so exactly, there's gonna be some circularity in the middle, and eventually you're gonna exit to kind of the next phase. Yeah.
I was just gonna add, you know, when you said about paying the bill, you never do it up front, except the one place I've seen this done is the airport, where you can, or at least at LaGuardia, that like you can, or when you sit down, you order on your app. But I think to your point, for a very good reason, because you want to catch your flight. You don't want to wait for someone to, it's like that efficiency of they want a different experience. You want one interaction with that waiter, and that's bringing your food, and that's it. And then you have other places to be. And it's interesting to think about, like, how does these experiences that are very standard, but like, how do you modify them the value.
And as we get to talking about co-creation and what's the right word I'm looking for shared value, right? That gives value to the customer because they can do the whole interaction, and if they need to leave, they can get up and leave. And it gives value to the employee because they don't have to keep track of who's paid, who's not, who's running out on a check, right? So yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I also like this example because there are many different food model or restaurant models. Because I've been to a lot of fast casual places. They want you to pay first and bust your own table and take care of a lot of the work that they want to do. They don't do, and they can focus on the food delivery. But to your point, it's also like maybe that's advantageous if you're at an airport, but if you're just like going to Cava, you're like, come on, you know.
Or any decent barbecue joint in Texas.
Well,
You're paying before you get your food.
And that brings up an interesting point because, and we'll see this a little bit later, right? Different versions of the same service set up different expectations, right? And so you walk into a Cava, Sweet Green or whatever, right? You have a certain expectation of what service you're going to get. And that's not going to be the same expectation of service that you're going to get at a Gramercy Tavern, right? At a 5-star, at a 3-star Michelin, that kind of thing. It's how do you set up the mental model for the customer? How do you lay the foundation for their expectations of what service they're going to be receiving? And then, more importantly, how do you deliver on what that expectation is? Where can you find moments where you can exceed that expectation and bring moments of delight and all that good service design-y stuff? Yes?
I think what's really interesting about restaurants is the idea of timing as well. Timing is like everything. So if I'm eating a meal and then, I'm finishing up and then my plates are being taken away, that to me spoils the vibe. And so timing is always so crucial, I think, in restaurants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this quote, and part of why I use this slide is because it was a good slide to get the quote up there. This excellence reflex is actually a concept that was developed or first articulated by Danny Meyer's. He was a chef named Michael Romano. He was the chef, not the opening chef, but an early chef at Union Square Cafe. Later became the head of culinary operations for all of Union Square Hospitality. Talks about this thing he called the excellence reflex, right? The natural reaction to fix something that isn't right or to improve something that could be better. He talked about this as, this was in relation to who they hire, okay, and who they hire as servers. But I think it is a great mindset to bring to the design of services, because services are often trying to fix a problem that the customer is experiencing, right? So if you as a service designer, I think it's pretty fair to say that most of our inclinations are to make services as good as we can. And if something is not going right, let's fix it. If something can be improved, let's improve it. So I wanted to kind of share that perspective as well. He also talks about something that he calls, he refers to as writing a great last chapter. And based on the idea that mistakes are going to happen, right? Mistakes in service are going to happen. How do you fix them, right? Get your customer, if something goes wrong with the service, get your customer to the point where they can leave that service with a positive feeling, right? You want that last chapter that they experience, that last moment, to be something positive, because you think about, they always talk about in restaurant terms, right? If something goes wrong, you know, those moments that the customer is leaving the restaurant, right? You can kind of recover a bad situation in those final moments before they leave. Same thing with any service that gets designed, right? As the customer is exiting that service, how can we end on a high note? Yeah.
Just a note on that, because I've read the book as well.
Okay, fair enough.
Big fan. And you know this, but it's worth saying publicly. There has to be a culture that supports that instinct, right? And this gets back to what Zappos does, right? Like most call centers say you have to do a call in 2 minutes or you're fired, right? And Zappos like, take as long as you want. We care about the customer experience. And if you're on the call for an hour, we're cool with that. And we will not fire you if you're on a call for an hour, because our whole deal is make the customer happy, get them what they need. And if you need to improvise and whatever, we'll help you with that. So the corporation says it's okay to do the thing, and you're not yelled at if you try and do the thing, right? And it seems like too many times they say this on paper, like, we like the customer, but then they yell at you if you're, you know, didn't do your 5 plate count in 2 minutes or whatever the hell it is, like a machine. It's like, well, those are in direct conflict. And if management is not okay with supporting you doing the right thing, ain't gonna happen. People figure out what the rules are, spoken or unspoken, right? And so people like, so if I'm designing a service, I would want to start saying immediately at kickoff, like, there's a cultural change that has to happen here too. Like, if this is strictly going to be metrics driven, what we're about to propose is going to be less effective. I need everyone to like nod your head and acknowledge that that's the opportunity cost, because if you can't have both.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and think about for yourselves, how many products or services do you engage with just in your everyday life that you become loyal to just because of the service that they provide, or, you know, my wife and I joke about it all the time as a positive brand experience, right? You know, like, they just, even if something goes wrong, they just take care of you, right? They make you feel valued, right? They make you feel like solving your problem in that moment was the only thing they had to do, and it was the most important part of their day, right? You're gonna come back to services that make you feel that way. Yeah.
So she gave the example earlier about when you feel rushed, you don't like that because they're picking up your plate before you're done eating it.
Sure.
The flip side of that is that happens because restaurant managers pressure servers to get people out as fast as they can, or servers feel they need to because they need to turn more tables to make more tips. So, you know, businesses have these contradictory incentives to good service.
Right. And
that's the job of us.
I mean, and I struggle with this here at, you know, some of the work that I'm doing, right? You get those competing priorities of this team wants this KPI, and, you know, that's where they want to focus. This leader wants to focus on this KPI, and they are directly opposed to one another. So how do you get them to kumbaya? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very common situation. I already faced it so many times. And the way that I learned to try to fix it is to put the voice of the customer as the customers as the decision maker. So it's not about the team or the other team. It's about what the customer wants. So back into the restaurant, it's the same. So you can invest like in the environment, or you can invest on the food or the service. What will be the good thing? Depends on the customer, depends on what they want. So that's why I think voice of the customer, collect data, collect their needs is super, super important.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Evidencing of service, right? Demonstrating that the service provided delivers its value, right? It's those tangible aspects that customers can see and experience, which provide insight into the quality of the service. Right? The classic examples are, right, from hotels, right? The mint on the pillow, the turn down, the little fold on the toilet paper, right? You know that somebody has been to service your room because they've left these little hints. Right, in the restaurant, we learn it as somebody gets up to use the restroom, you come back and you kind of freshen their seat. You might fold their napkin and set it at their place setting. If they get up and they've pushed their chair out into the middle of the walkway, you sort of push it back in behind them. All these little things, again, just as evidence like, ooh, somebody has been there. I have received some service and it was hopefully nice. Now, it's also, in restaurant terms, right? We look at things like the physical environment, the menu presentation, right? Different restaurants, different levels of service for restaurants, they're gonna have different menu presentations, right? It's gonna be the difference between receiving a very nicely printed, scripted menu versus looking up at a digital board, right? That gives different expectations and kind of gives a different evidence of service. The staff interactions, if there's to-go packaging, what that is gonna look like. So there are all these little different demonstrations of the service that you're getting. Now, I wanna do a little test or do a little activity. If you have something to write with and write on, great. Casey is gonna hand out, if you need a pen and something to write on, great. If you don't have anything, that's okay, you can just think things. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you a few pictures of some restaurants, and I'm gonna give you a minute per picture, and in that minute, I want you to tell me everything you think you know about what you see just based on the picture. Okay, so let's see if this works. All right, so the first picture. Here we go. All right, so take a look at that and tell me what you know about this restaurant just based on the picture.
Sure. I think I need to lean on something. Thank you.
Think about who your customer is, think about what kind of service you're gonna get, think about why you think those things. Think about I don't know, what time of day that service might most likely be at. What some of those circumstances around that service might be. All right, and we're gonna get ready and go to the next picture. Again, who the customer is, what kind of service you think you're gonna get, maybe even what the menu is, what kind of food they serve. What are your expectations of what you're going to receive? And next. And the final one. I can't decide when doing this if 1 minute is a really long time or a really short time.
That's perfect.
Because standing up here like this, just for a minute with nothing going on is okay.
I can't see it.
All right, about 30 more seconds.
Is this the fourth?
What? Yeah, this is the fourth, and this is all there is. Just four pictures. And spoiler alert, you'll get to see all 4 of them together in the next slide. So, all right. Okay. So, I think it's safe to say, right, these are going to be four very different experiences, right? So, who wants to talk about this one for a second? Yeah.
I think that's a hotel restaurant.
Okay.
Music is okay, not great. The food is okay, not great.
Now, why do you think that?
Yeah.
Like, what are the pieces of evidence that you see that are gonna lead you to think that?
So the hotel first has to do with the bar and the restaurant so close together. I feel like I see that a lot, right?
Okay.
Also the interior design. Which
Okay.
is, I don't know how I feel about that, especially the lamps, which look very cheap, but very trying to create a mood, but it's not really working.
Okay.
The bar looks a little bit dusty, a little bit dirty. The seats look a little bit dirty, but like somebody tried to clean them, right? And the floor is just very strange. And I don't know about the music, but I can just hear the music. It's
Okay.
like, fine, it's not great. I think the menu has hamburgers, sliders.
Did anybody come up with anything radically different from that? Yes.
Yeah, maybe I go to too many bars in Manhattan. I sort of said posh, classy drinks, date nights, business meetings.
So again,
evenings.
What makes you think that? Like, what are the pieces of evidence that you're looking at?
I think I'm probably projecting, but you know, to me, when I look at that, it just signifies an evening and after work sort of place. It's just the mood that's sort of created, both with the bar, the low lightings. I sort of think of it as a place where I can get a Negroni or a classic American drink. If I drank, I don't drink anymore. But yeah, to me, the mood, the dark sort of, the woodiness, the lights, to me, it just sort of signifies more of an evening drinking place where I might see finance bros.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where my imagination took me.
And who goes to this restaurant?
So I did contrast and I said, ladies who lunch. But
that is exactly what I thought, yeah.
More of an afternoon brunchy, you take your business partners, you go there for lunch. And I even categorized it by saying it to me gave me the feel of the Ottolenghi restaurants like in London.
Yeah.
Again, I'm projecting. I am a bit of a foodie, but that's kind of what I thought, right? Like the contrast is the bright lights, so more of a daytime afternoon spot. Very different menu as well, perhaps a vegan, modern cuisine, I don't know. Okay. But I'm projecting.
So I hate to, because I need to know, I didn't see it at first. But doesn't that look like Ernest Hemingway is looking at you in that mural?
Maybe a
Did anyone else see that?
Oh, I do now.
Right, because now I can't stop seeing it, right? So that's when it came into masculine.
Okay, yeah, another piece of evidence that's gonna tell you.
Whiskey is kind of how, and it was all centered around that imagery.
This one is
drinks, no food.
There's no tables.
Drinks, no food, because there are no tables.
And those bar stools say, have one drink, but don't stay too long.
Okay. What about this one up here? What does anybody think about that one?
Local fast casual.
Yeah.
Local
fast casual, dine and go, no servers, pick it up at the counter, bus your table, yeah.
Reasonable price, good food.
Now, again, what are the pieces of evidence that when you look at that picture that makes you think that?
Like the counter on the side.
Trash can.
The counter on the side where you can come pick up your food and walk out, or
Yeah.
get hot food, eat it at your table and get out the door.
Yeah.
It seems like a no fuss, fanfare sort of place. You can do your thing and get moving, but you also know that you'll get a good hot bite that you can quickly grab and get on your way to like finish other things.
Yeah.
It seems like something that, you know, you've spent your day shopping and you want to get a quick bite along the way. That's kind of a spot you'd go.
I see the trash can over here, right, where
The
clearly
mixed match
you
tables.
bust your own, right,
I love
very
it.
uncomfortable
I love
seats.
Yeah.
There is some care there because the fresh flowers
Oh, not just,
and the water.
yes, not to say that there's not care, right? And to your point earlier, right, this is gonna be a much different service than this provides. Doesn't mean you can't do that well, doesn't mean you can't have moments of delight, right? Things that make the service more pleasant to experience, right? The design is bright, right? You know, so they're trying to give a certain feeling, but it's not someplace that you're gonna wanna linger, right? You're not gonna wanna sit in that chair for 2 hours enjoying a meal. Yeah.
So I use getting ketchup as kind of a litmus test of things, for better or for worse. Also the seating, but it's like, is this a place where I have to go and get my ketchup, like at the taqueria place, the
Okay.
top that you talked about?
Yeah,
Like,
you
going
have
in,
to
you
grab,
get your-
it's not ketchup, but yeah, you have to grab your condiments here.
Or is a server gonna see that before, yeah, I've ordered a burger, so I'm gonna bring the ketchup bottle out like at the same time as it, without me having to anticipate it.
And what about this one? Who? Yeah.
It's a diner-inspired mid-range restaurant that serves elevated classics.
That is very precise.
Like, you're gonna pay $40 for a burger.
It's called
You're gonna
Johnny
like it.
Rockets.
Okay.
Eggs all day.
Right, so, right, all this to say, right, you, without knowing anything about these pictures, what restaurant they are, or anything about where they are located, hotel or not, you develop a mental model of what that service is going to be because of the pieces of evidence that you see as you take it in. Okay, so as you design your services, wherever they may be, right, think about the fact that you're gonna put these, I don't know, breadcrumbs or signposts or something that is going to demonstrate to your customer what kind of service they're about to receive. And then, how do you exceed it, right? Maybe exceeding it is just the little fresh flowers there. Who knows? You had something, a question in the back?
Yeah, I can't help but think that you can get a burger at either of these places, like across all of them, and they're probably within a $5 range, if we're being honest. You could get a burger that's the same, will you get French fries? And then what's the quality of service? And so it's interesting that maybe it's not the price or the expectation that you'll see here, but do you feel justified in spending your money at that place based on the other parts of it? So
Sure.
Are you getting a $20 burger in that uncomfortable chair, vice versa?
Now, I agree, that is very restaurant specific.
Yes.
So if I think about how to then, how does that then inform service design in general, right? How do you indicate value for the service that you're going to provide? Sometimes that service is paid, sometimes that service is included. It's always paid for, whether it's wrapped up in a subscription price or a fee for service or something like that, right? So how do you justify what you're gonna pay here versus what you're gonna pay here, here, or here?
I'm gonna comment like on top of that, yes,
Okay.
and zoom further out and context that the diner place in Times Square might be the same price as the hotel bar in Boise.
There you
So
go.
zoom out even bigger to the context.
Yes.
Of where
Great
it
point.
physically is.
Great point. Yeah.
Just a quick post on pricing expectation. I don't know if you've been following the news, but McDonald's is actually having some customer revolt because customers clearly perceive that their burgers are worth X because of inflation or slight price gouging, they're charging Y. And customers like, I can't go there with you. Like the burger is this and I will not pay more, and if it's more, I will go somewhere else.
Right.
McDonald's is this, not this, and they had their reasons for jacking the price, and now that looks like they're quietly trying to roll it back.
As a sales rep in the food industry, I would hear all the time from customers, I can't raise my prices because like if we as the wholesale provider were, if I was trying to sell them something that was maybe more expensive than an ingredient they were using, right? They would say to me literally, I can't raise my prices because my customers won't pay more than $29 for X, whatever it was, right? But same kind of thing, right? And they didn't think about, if they have to charge more, how can they improve their service? How can they give something else that is going to be a service differentiator for that increased cost, right? They just look at it at straight math. So it's, yeah, that's an interesting point.
I've also seen people almost do the inverse, or similar to what you're saying, where they drastically underprice what they're selling and they miss out on a lot of business because they actually set the opposite expectation. Like for instance, a grocery brand that's selling coffee for like $8.99. The coffee is actually $15 coffee, but people then don't value that coffee. They think it's bad coffee.
Sure.
And so when it comes to designing experiences, it's really interesting how you can really like flip someone's expectations to lower than what you deliver.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the final piece of the service design puzzle is, right, that services are holistic, right? And this kind of ties everything together, all the pieces that we've been talking about throughout the evening, right? And so for me, right, it's developing an understanding, and this is clear in a restaurant setting, and I've kind of carried it through, right? Customers do not experience services in discrete parts, right? You don't walk into a restaurant and say, oh, this is the greeting part of the evening. Now this is the menu reading part of the evening, right? And now I'm going to enter the ordering part of the evening. You just look at it as 2.5 hours, if you're at that kind of restaurant, 2.5 hours of your life where you are experiencing a holistic service that includes everything from being greeted to when you leave, right? And so in an exceptional service, all of those parts are working together at kind of the peak of their individual performances to add up to a whole. Now, one of the most important things that I learned in my restaurant career, in my hospitality career, as it relates to this kind of thing, is that the details of service matter, right? The little things that you do to add just that little bit of extra something matter. And I think that it is no coincidence that in a restaurant where you end your meal is the exact same place that you were when you began, right? As you walk into a restaurant, you are greeted by a host who welcomes you. And if everything is going right, the last thing you experience as you walk out the door is that very same person saying, thank you for using our service. Right? It comes around full circle. And so again, how can you build that into the services that you are designing so that there's that closure, so that there's that feeling of, right now, I don't know about you, but if I leave a restaurant and nobody says goodbye to me, it just feels incomplete, right? So in a digital sense, or in any other service, right? How do you close it? How do you sort of end the engagement? In the end, What's most meaningful is creating positive, uplifting outcomes for human experiences and human relationships. Business, like life, is all about how you make people feel. It is that simple, and it is that hard. There are ways in which any great restaurant, whether it is fast casual, whether it is 3-star Michelin, right? They make you feel better for having experienced their service. And so I encourage you, when you visit these restaurants that make you feel that way, pay attention to it and let it teach you the way that it has taught me. And I encourage you to capture that feeling and remember it and design hospitality and bring it to everything that you design. I'll take, yes, I'll take questions of all kinds.
I have a wrap up based on what you said at the beginning. So a friend of mine and I, who's also in UX, we have taken it upon ourselves to systematically work our way through all of the Danny Meyer restaurants in the city.
Not a bad, so I'm available on Thursday. And yeah.
So here's what I can tell you. So TLTR, the Modern and Gramercy Tavern, I think, are the best in terms of experience. Also Union Square Cafe and the Milano, whatever that one is, also very good. But what's nice is they know they're providing a good service. They know they've been trained to provide a good service, and they are therefore willing to engage with you in discussions about how it's going, how they're feeling about their experience. So we'll sort of have a chat with the staff, like, did you feel you were trained well? Are you trying to get your what's the wine sommelier? That's the thing that they push, and they're willing to have a dialogue with you. And so, you know, you can sort of like, with your dining companion, sort of like, oh, I like how they brought the appetizer like this or something like that. And oh, they were out of this. I like how they gave us an extra appetizer. Like, so you can critique live how it's going, but then you can chat with the staff. And we've been given tours of the kitchen. Like, we got extra desserts, and like they love to, because like there's all this work that most people are like, yeah, whatever. But like, we're like, we love the fact you did X. It was so great you did Y. No one does Y. And they love it that people like notice, right? And so it's very fun to sort of just go have a service experience every month. And the food, of course, is fantastic, right?
People notice good service, and it doesn't just have to be in a restaurant, right? People, and you all, I'm sure, have been in this situation, right? You notice good service, or at the very least, if you don't notice good service, you notice bad service, right? And you know, good service might just kind of wash over you. Exceptional service, you're going to notice. Bad service, you're definitely going to notice. So
it's interesting that the last slide you talk about integration of all of that. And there's someone that talks about how there are different teams have different KPIs and everything. And in services, also like in restaurants and like food industries, a lot of this service for us to get the meal in front of our table, for us to enjoy, involve a lot of different service providers, like not just the kitchen and the restaurant itself, but like, as you mentioned, there's resi involved. And if you want to take it away, or like you order it for you to take it at home, there's like the food delivery.
Yeah.
I would just want to know like your experience, and how do you see, how can we integrate those different service that involves different service providers into a very integrated.
Well, I can tell you this, right? At a restaurant of the level where I predominantly worked, which was maybe not quite Gramercy Tavern, but I worked at, full service sit down restaurants every night before service. And, I'll tell you that story in a second. Every night before service, right? They get the kitchen together with the wait staff, right? They bring everybody together and they talk about what the menu is going to be, if there are any specials, if all the things about the menu, if anything's out, if, hey, we've got too much of this wine. Let's try to move it, whatever it is, right? So they bring together all, to use business parlance, right? They bring together all the stakeholders and they get them in a room together. and they have a conversation. And, right, and they plan how the evening is going to go, how the service is going to be delivered. Basically every time before it's going to be delivered. Now, that's maybe a little excessive in a business setting, but right, just get people together and talk about it. You know, and find the people who have a clear stake in how it occurs. So.
But what about is like, sorry for follow up, if it's like that could happen maybe easier if we're under the same roof, right? So like, but if you have partners that works with you, like without being too controlling of them. Like.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to work to schedule that time, right? You know, whether it's even just a weekly, like, hey, let's get together and talk about how this service is going. I mean, we have those meetings here all the time at Mailchimp, right? It's, you know, a weekly, like, all right, let's talk about what happened last week. You know, that kind of thing. So.
I was gonna ask, did you have any thoughts about service design and the show The Bear?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You ever seen the show The Bear?
I did see the show The Bear. Very triggering.
Like any non-triggering thoughts about service design in particular?
No
spoilies.
No spoilers. Okay. So, you know, I did recognize in the show that they definitely, like, many people in the show, and in fact, one of the actors, he's the guy who plays the handyman, right? He is a chef. And clearly they did their research, and clearly they had many people who worked in many restaurants, like, there on set. So, like, there were definitely things that they got right as far as what the kitchen experience is. There are definitely things that they dramatized or, you know, tweaked to build drama. But you know, in general, and sorry, did I kind of go off track from what your question was? I just got off on a tangent.
No, it was a big question. Well, I remember one part, not a spoiler, that they do the upscale part, but they also have someone making the sandwiches in the back. And I feel like a lot of times with clients, they're like, we serve everyone and we do everything. And so I'm curious to see how that plays out, I guess, in season 3, but.
No, so the closest experience that I sort of had with that is I worked in a restaurant that tried to be open for all 3 meal periods. And that is very hard. So, right, to sort of tie it to your point, like being everything to everybody, you can do it, but it's really hard. You know, and I think that is true for services as well. Like you have to, whether it's through, and full disclosure, I'm making this up as I go along, right? Whether it's through the personas you create and how you're serving them, or right, you sort of have to define, I think, who your target audience is going to be, and just lean into that and really like get that right. And yes, you may lose some business on either side. When I was in sales, one of the 2 owners of the company, he always used to say to me, our competitors need customers too. And he would say that in a situation like if we ran into a customer that was just a pain in the ass, you just like let them go somewhere else. We don't need that, right? Or if they were really, you know, we knew who we served well. And every time we tried to serve a customer that was sort of outside that circle of who we served well, something got screwed up. And so it's like, just don't. It's going to be more valuable to serve the customers you serve well, really well, than to try to get everybody. I feel like that was controversial because a whole lot of hands went up right as I said that.
Someone else can go in. I'm good.
I think your point is just following up on that. I think what I've been wrestling with is so much of service design is really mapping things out and kind of setting in stone, like what are people's mental models, where there's breaks in service. And then you've talked about excellence and kind of, this has been great to get a perspective from someone running a restaurant and running sales and these things, because those magic moments when someone brings out, oh, we just happen to have an extra dessert that we've been testing, or like these little magic things, break all of that convention. So it's like, how do you decide when to do something that's probably low cost but high delight?
Yeah.
And like, or it not just like a turned out corner, but it would be like a bear in a hotel, like on the bed that probably doesn't cost a lot, but is not expected. So it's like that surprise element is the hard part to figure out, like in a dynamic, like it never seems like restaurants are slow. You never hear about them like, oh, nothing's going on.
Has anybody read the book Moments That Matter? Yeah, it's a good book. And they tell one story about a hotel. I'm gonna get it wrong, but the important point of the story, there was this hotel somewhere, and I think they were, business was slow, they couldn't get, and so they installed like a popsicle vending machine or something like that would give like fresh popsicles. And that little moment of delight kind of turned their business around. And it was really simple to like give anybody just a free popsicle. And somehow they became known for that, and business increased, and it was, everybody lived happily ever after, so.
Yeah, just very quickly, because of all the comments, one thing we didn't talk about was leadership. Because I think service design without leadership, it's very difficult to hold on to, because you'll have somebody who will come in with a different agenda or some or that competing. So I think that's key to success.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, you said, you talked about how an experience should be customized. Yeah, but maybe time's up.
Oh, no, I was listening, yeah. Oh, okay, one or two more questions, okay.
Can you say more about, if you do establish that you have like, it's 3 different personas that you serve well, and you're trying to customize something for people in real time. You mentioned like surveys or VOC data. I'm just curious, from someone who has a lot of experience, like any ways you found to customize an experience in real time?
I think that is, the restaurant industry is unique in that you are having direct interaction with the person who is receiving your service in the moment that you are delivering it and they are receiving it. So it is very easy to be very reactive and very spontaneously delightful and spontaneously personalized. I'll take the wisdom of the crowd here too. Like how can you bring some of those spontaneous moments of personalization? Obviously you're gonna get customer data, and you can use that kind of reactively, but sort of in the moment, I don't know, like.
So this is, and you find the digital equivalent of this, and Danny talked about this in his book, which is he has given his staff social permission to read the room, right? And within a certain price point, they can give someone an extra appetizer, no questions asked. They can find out it's an anniversary, and the staff will make a dessert gratis for the couple because the waiter figured out it was their anniversary, and then it goes in their system, and then if they come back next year, they get to they've given, and Zappos does this too, like within a certain range, they empower the frontline staff to read the situation and respond in a positive fashion instantly, right? This, I would assume, go to call center and stuff like that. Like they said, okay, if the person's having these problems, you may do these spontaneous things if you wish,
right? And
we won't yell at you.
It's hard to do if you're not having human to human interaction, but it's possible. All right, we'll take one comment, then we got one more question. and then we gotta wrap it up.
I sat in on a Salesforce thing today where they announced Agent Force.
Okay.
And they talked a lot about personalization and using the data and things that they've been collecting all along about all of us. And they're like, it's just gonna get easier.
And Danny Meyer is notoriously famous for collecting every piece of data on every customer who walks through his door and using that for exactly those things. And he's got, you know, data.
That was a big part of it, was like they're offer the personalization and maybe just that's how it's gonna get done.
I just saw your comments about like the customization of the experience is interesting, especially for the restaurant experience, because I think that when you're thinking about restaurants, like a restaurant is per se is already like a brand in a way. Like we looked at 4 different pictures, we already had an idea of what kind of service we were going to expect. So I think that the customization of the experience like works like to a certain extent, because you're already sort of like tailoring your experience by choosing where you want to go in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that if you zoom up, like I think one thing maybe that we didn't touch upon is like where are those experiences, like how are they connected to the larger ecosystem or they are embedded in?
Yeah.
Like for example, before we were talking about the airport experience or like the hotel experience. Those are very different, and like as consumers in those experiences, we think very differently about what's quality and like what is you know, an enjoyable like successful service. If you're in an airport, obviously you're not there for having dinner, so you have to move quick. So that's kind of your KPI.
Yeah.
If you're in an hotel having vacation, you just want to relax and like take your time. So I think there's and like all these things like around the restaurant experience itself like impact how we judge it, like how we access it, and how satisfied we feel, like, you know, how much money we have, how much time we have, do we have to go back to the office, are we going out, are we not on a schedule, like all these things. There was a comment before about like, you know, KPIs are really coming like from what the customer like is expecting and what they're valuing, and I think that's really true. Anyway.
Absolute last question and then.
It's not a question, I think it's just to add on their point, maybe Spotify is like a good example on personalization. At the same time, as a tech company is like huge. So they use the data, and at least for me, like there's like a lot of daily mix, especially for and also they're like the year review. So I think it's how you combine the data and create something different. Even though it's like everybody receives the same, but it's like it's a different one.
Yeah. Can we give David another hand? Feel free to grab more food. Speaking of service, we have some extra takeout containers, so eat more food, take food home. And yeah, say hi to at least one person you don't know today. Ask them what their takeaway is, or if you want to be really spicy, you can ask them they're feeling some pumpkin spice lattes. I hear that. There are a lot of opinions in the room. But yeah, otherwise, have a good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.